Well, welcome everyone to the Early Detection and Rapid Response to Emerging Threats, Stories of Success session here in the Ontario Invasive Species Forum. My name is Sarah Sanan and I will be the moderator for this session. I'd ask that you please direct all of your questions to the question chat drop-down tab in the control panel, and we'll be answering those at the end of everyone's presentations. So our first speaker today is Lauren Bell. Lauren is the, Lauren Bell is the interim program manager at the Invasive Species Center. Lauren oversees program implementation at the center and manages the Early Detection and Rapid Response Network of Ontario, a citizen science and community action program aimed at equipping communities with the resources and the information needed to detect, report, and manage invasive species in Ontario. Lauren currently sits as the Canadian representative on the Midwest Invasive Plant Network. The Early Detection and Rapid Response Network is a community science and action project coordinated by the Invasive Species Center and run in collaboration with the Eastern Ontario Model Forest and the Ontario Invasive Plant Council. This project aims to train and equip the public with the skills and resources necessary to mitigate the spread of invasive species in Ontario. This presentation will provide an update on the 2020 project highlights. Lauren, whenever you're ready, I will switch you over and share your screen. All right, take her away.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Great, does everything look okay?
Yep, looks good to me.
Okay, great, thanks so much. So hi everyone, thank you for having me speak today. I'm going to be talking about the Early Detection and Rapid Response Network, a little bit of background on the network, as well as some updates for where we're at currently as of 2021 with the project. So if you're not familiar with the Invasive Species Center, we are a not-for-profit organization. We're based out of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario with a Canada-wide scope. Our main priorities are connecting stakeholders' knowledge and technology with the resources necessary to mitigate invasive species spread within Canada. And we focus on three major pillars, which is harm to the environment, society, and economy. So the project today I'm going to be talking about is one of the projects run through the Invasive Species Center, and that is our Community Action and Community Science Network, which is the Early Detection and Rapid Response Network of Ontario. So this project is coordinated by the Invasive Species Center, but it's run in collaboration with our amazing partners at the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, as well as the Eastern Ontario Model Forest. Since its inception in 2015, this project has been funded by the Ontario Trillium Foundation, so really grateful for their support. So what is EDRR? As mentioned, it started in 2015 as a collaboration between the Invasive Species Center and the Ontario Invasive Plant Council. And it's a community science and action network that's focused on training, education, and outreach to communities in order to increase detection, reporting, and response to invasive species within Ontario and wider. So it's really an eyes on the ground approach. We take training and education, bring it to communities, address species of concern, both that are currently in the area to avoid further spread, but also new and early detection species. So what are the species that are not currently present in that area? Taking that information to different groups, from everyone from the public to industry to government, and really making sure that there's a good conversation happening on potential threats for invasive species, and also connecting people to the tools and resources needed to mitigate that further spread. And so our kind of motto for the program is slowing the spread of invasive species one community at a time. So a little bit more specific on some of the items that we do kind of on a day-to-day basis. We help fill invasive species knowledge and tool gaps. So those can be actual tools for invasive species management, but also resources and important information linking that to those partners or organizations or public members that are interested. We coordinate stewardship removals, so removals of invasive species that can be removed by volunteers. So we wouldn't coordinate kind of giant hogweed removals, for example, but we do focus our efforts on those species where manual removal is a great option, and where we can utilize the network to really pull interested volunteers to help manage invasive species in core areas of concern. So one of the great examples photographed here is garlic mustard is a great stewardship opportunity for volunteers. So we help link, essentially, sometimes we run them ourselves, and sometimes we link partners with the resources and volunteer network needed to have those events or those management plans. And also we work on a lot of different opportunities and collaborations with a lot of different organizations on a lot of different various projects. So stewardship removal, connecting their resources, and I'll list later in the presentation some of the other examples of projects we've worked on. So it's really this idea of helping fostering that community science and action. How can we get folks on the ground, actually kind of hands in the soil or out monitoring or out reporting invasive species to help mitigate that further spread, whether that's further spread from kind of Canada or US to Canada, or local spread where we're keeping invasive species from moving into local properties, local watersheds, local parks and things like that. So it really works on a wide range of scope. So there's very, very local kind of grassroots, and then there's also kind of this more Canada-wide view of how can we help spread awareness on priority pests for entry into Canada? How can we use the network to get folks monitoring for species that aren't currently present in Ontario? So it's been a really great opportunity to have that wide range of scope, and based on the communities that we go to, the scope is a bit different each time. So it's been a really great challenge. Other items that we work on is resource production and dissemination, and as well a large part is also responding to public inquiries. Linking people primarily, the primary method is linking people to existing resources or taking information on what species are current gaps, where are the resource gaps, and trying to fill those gaps with the network. So our overarching goal for the project is to provide tools, training, and resources necessary to help slow the spread and introduction of invasive species in Ontario. And the primary way that we do that is through education and outreach. So we have a formal model for the EDRR network, which I'll talk about in a few slides, but essentially we like to work along the invasion curve, which is pictured here. The main area that we focus on for EDRR is at or before species arrival. And so we work in this area because we know long-term control has increased costs and increased likelihood that eradication may not be possible. So we do like to focus in on kind of prevention and eradication at or before species arrival in those early days of an infestation. And so a lot of our work is focused on monitoring, reporting early detections, utilizing the reporting tools from partners, and making sure that we have as many eyes on the ground as possible for priority pests and new introductions to the area. And this also has, of course, economic benefits as well, because we know the longer term control is, the longer you're controlling a species, the more expensive and costly it is to a community. So we like to work kind of right at that species arrival, but also not entirely focusing just on early detection for certain species, because we do know there is a large demand for management resources for species that are currently well established in communities. And so helping reduce local spread is also a main focus as well. So just to kind of give a rough idea of some of the numbers that we have achieved to date since 2015, we have hosted 195 plus training workshops, presentations, plant removals, surveys, and outreach events. So we're pretty proud of that number. It's been a lot of hard work from a lot of great people and a lot of great partners to get us to this point. We've had engaged with over 17,000 people at various, those are this year digitally, but from the past, we've exclusively held face-to-face events. And so those are in-person kind of contact, making sure that people are connected to resources and answering questions, training on specific species or general taxa. And so from that, we have had over 800 volunteers that have committed over 2,500 on the ground action hours. So hands in the soil or out on the land, monitoring and reporting invasive species. So thanks to the Ontario Trillium Foundation, we were able to move into Eastern Ontario. The specific catchment for OTF purposes is the Kingston, Rideau, and Quinte catchment, which you can see on the map here. And our main goal right now is to fill those invasive gap needs, develop new resources that are a priority for Eastern Ontario, but of course we know invasive species have no boundaries, and so resources that are beneficial to Eastern Ontario have been beneficial to Ontario and Canada-wide as a whole. which I'll talk about some of those new resources in a second. And we've also been providing presentations, webinars, and different opportunities. Amongst COVID-19, we've had some challenges for in-person, but I think we've really rose to the occasion to get some monitoring and management happening on a more virtual scale through lots of support for folks that are interested in getting out and providing that information for how to get on the ground doing some invasive species management. So this is the model that we work from. I won't dive into it too much, but it is our formal model because we do have been in quite a few different cities and different areas since 2015. Our current Eastern Ontario movement, we utilize this model to enter into the new catchment. And so currently right now we are in phase 3 and 4. So we've held partner and public consultations to see where the invasive species gaps and needs are. And now we're filling and addressing those gaps with knowledge transfer and community action events. And so to date, since April of 2020, under this new grant, we've had 390 committed volunteers, and those are people with kind of hands in the dirt, feet on the ground, really out there monitoring and managing for invasive species. And then we've also engaged over 5,000 people. These are just some examples of some of the past events that we have held. So we've done surveying, we've done training. This was an annual training with Ontario Parks. We do garlic mustard pulls. We've hosted a ton of different workshops, and maybe you've had a chance to attend some of them. We've done training for land managers on hemlock woolly adelgid and other priority pests, as well. Our most recent in-person workshop, which was last summer. And this was our full day Manitoulin Island workshop in 2019. That was really great, and we're hoping to get to do this kind of format again in the future. So what kind of things can you expect from us? We have webinars, we have community science opportunities, early detection outreach and alerts, different best management practices and expertise, which I'll talk about from our partners in a second. We've offered site tours in the past, presentations, resource sharing between partners. Before COVID, we had a great information session in Niagara Falls when we talked about different priority pests to watch out for in the wine industry and the agriculture industry. So there's been a lot of tailored workshops and presentations as well. So there's a lot of cool opportunities, and we're always looking for opportunities to partner with folks that are interested in having some outreach done. Right now our focus is primarily Eastern Ontario, but it is an Ontario-wide network, and so we're always happy to talk about collaboration that we can work together towards common invasive species goals. Some examples of some of the work we've done this year virtually, since we had to shift our kind of normal in-person work a little bit due to the pandemic. We've done some webinars. This year's focus of concern from partners and the public for Eastern Ontario was primarily European gypsy moth was the primary species of concern in that area from what we heard from our feedback. And so we hosted 2 European gypsy moth technical webinars and one for the general public as well with some great speakers. And those are the one with Taylor Scar and David Akavich is available on our YouTube page. And we've also had a couple different promoting community action events, dog strangling, vine removal, native planting events, where people take the products and plant them on their own, or in this case, the European gypsy moth egg mass scraping contest was a huge success, in which we held webinars, we had resources produced to help people understand proper methods. We utilized partner resources to send out to the public, media releases to inform them on how to properly scrape egg masses, and then had them do it kind of in their own backyards, in their own communities, so they could safely scrape egg masses while still learning about the impacts of gypsy moth and having a hand in the management. And so from that first year campaign pilot project, we were able to have 12,000 egg masses scraped from trees across Ontario. And we have some new resources available through partnerships with, these ones are from the Eastern Ontario Model Forest. So we have French and English fact sheets for 2 species that were identified as a priority pest. So European gypsy moth, French and English fact sheet, and the Asian longhorn beetle French and English fact sheets are now available on the Invasive Species Center and the Eastern Ontario Model Forest website. So check those out if you're interested in learning a little bit more. And we're also excited for some new resources coming out from our great partners at the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, Himalayan balsam technical bulletins. This was a species product that we saw as a gap, and the public had came forward as a gap in how to properly manage Himalayan balsam. And so this is a technical bulletin that the OIPC is working on through the EDRR network. I'm excited for that to come out. And then they're also working on an invasive Phragmites technical bulletin update to match the best management practice that they've been worked on with the updated best management practice for Phragmites. So there's going to be an updated technical bulletin to go along with that through EDRR. So we're really excited about that as well. And of course, there's going to be a lot more opportunities for presentations and webinars going forward. So if you were interested in learning anything else about the EDRR network, there's always a lot going on and always a lot changing as we're moving into new and exciting opportunities through lots of different community action things. So for example, this past winter, we did some work with Silvicon Limited and the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid working group to promote community reports of hemlock trees to better understand what areas are at risk for introduction. And so we got 63 new hemlock stand reports just from citizens who were interested in reporting their local stands. And so that was a really great collaboration. So if there's any other ways that you can think of to utilize the network for Ontario, please don't hesitate to reach out and check out our program page to see if there's any other opportunities currently exist that you can kind of latch onto if there's any interest there. And of course, all of the events that we promote are also available through the different channels at the Invasive Species Center. So sign on to join our mailing list if you are interested in keeping up to date on invasive species initiatives and any community action outreach initiatives as well. It's also a great opportunity to link up if you're interested in having your community action event promoted through some of the channels as well as the Invasive Species Center network and EDRR network, because we're happy to help promote invasive species community action initiatives. And that is all for me. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome, Lauren. Thank you very much for getting us started. I'll change back to myself and I'll introduce our next speaker. So our next speaker is Linda McDougall. Linda is an ecologist with the City of London who helps lead and implement many of the city's award-winning natural heritage protection policies, conservation master plans, ecological restoration plans, and she also facilitates community stewardship programs to help protect London's environmentally significant areas. In her free time, Linda is an avid hiker turned birder who grows milkweed in her front yard and donates all the volunteer seedlings from her native dogwood tree to reforest London for use in local restoration projects. This presentation will go over the successful collaboration between the Ontario Invasive Plant Council and the city using the Creating an Invasive Plant Management Strategy, a framework for Ontario municipalities, document and process. London was the first municipality in Ontario to create, approve, and implement an invasive species strategy in 2017, and we'll review the high-level successes and lessons learned since invasive species management began in London in 2006. Now, I will let you share your screen, Linda. You should be good to go.
Great. Okay.
You're good.
Everyone, thanks Lauren, and thanks Sarah, particularly Lauren, my goodness, thanks for sharing the early detection rapid response network stuff. We're so grateful for all our partners, the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, the Invasive Species Center, and all the folks that help us here in London and make a huge difference to what it is that we're doing and allow us to focus on what we do instead of inventing best management practices and other things. So thanks for that great presentation. So yes, as Sarah mentioned, we have a long history in London of controlling invasive species, and every year we add new species to the list of those that we're managing. Last time I spoke to the folks at the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority who help manage our ESAs for us in London under a contract. They had over 30 species that they're now helping address for us for the city. So here you can see the growing list, starting with buckthorn back in 2006. That expanded to include garlic mustard and loosestrife 2009. And then it's just exponentially kind of exploded since 2013 at the range of species that we're managing. And so to help us focus and target and prioritize, it was around 2015, 2016 that the idea that, yes, I think we need a strategy for the city. And this was about the same time that the Ontario Invasive Plant Council and the Invasive Species Centre put together the Creating an Invasive Plant Management Strategy, a framework for Ontario municipalities document. You can see, I think that's some lovely dog strangling vine on the front there. So it's an intimidating process to think about doing an invasive plant management strategy for your whole municipality or city. But fortunately, a lot of the heavy lifting had been done in this framework. And then we had folks who helped us. Owen Williams from the OIPC spent a lot of time helping us and reviewing drafts and making suggestions. And we worked collaboratively with the OIPC, the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, for about a year or a year and a half until we got the document to where we were satisfied with it and it made sense. And we did complete it and then take it to council with a staff report in 2017. And part of the reasoning or the rationale that, you know, it was easy for council to support it was that it fully aligns with council's strategic plan, and that includes, you know, protection of the natural heritage system and control of invasive species. It aligns with London's official plan and all of the environmental policies and direction to protect and enhance the city's natural heritage system. And you know, it made sense to have a citywide strategy with priorities to help us focus our efforts strategically to control invasives. So if you're being asked to comment on your council's strategic plan or your official plan, makes sense to put forward comments identifying the importance of controlling invasive species. You know, as we know, after habitat loss, it's one of the biggest threats to ecological integrity and biodiversity. So those are great opportunities to put forward and get in the control of invasive species into official documents like strategic plans and official plans, and then that will help you when you bring forward a invasive plant management strategy. So our process starts with inventory and mapping of priority invasive plants. That sounds pretty daunting, and I'll be honest, we haven't mapped all of the invasive species in the city, but certainly when we do natural heritage studies of environmentally significant areas or an EIS as part of an environmental assessment or other studies, we make sure that one of the tasks is mapping those invasive species. And I'll talk about some of the other mapping pieces as we go along. And then, of course, as we heard from Lauren, the importance of that early detection rapid response piece and management of existing invasive plants, ecological restoration is important. And then, of course, that prevention, which ties right back in with number 2 there, that early detection rapid response piece. So one of the number 1 recommendations coming out of the strategy was to develop a Phragmites control program according to the process in the strategy. And we retained Janice Gilbert, of course, who helped us with a Phragmites control strategy for the city. We developed some mapping and came up with a watershed-based priority to strategically identify at a high level, you know, in best case scenario, when we had the resources and the ability to manage, we would follow that process or that mapping in the watershed-based approach. But as other opportunities arose, of course, those would be done as well. It was a great process. We had folks from all of the conservation authorities attend. We had neighboring municipalities attend. And others, and through that process, you know, we had gifts kind of land on our doorstep, and where our objectives aligned with other conservation authorities. For example, the Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority wanted to treat all the Phragmites in their watershed that overlapped with the city's boundary and split costs with us. So that was an easy yes. So that points to some of the benefits of collaborating with your neighbors, with your CA and others, to see where those partnerships and opportunities that you can leverage occur. And there's a number of other things on here, and I won't read them all, but it's all in the document, which is online, and you could take a look at that. And those little boxes in the middle are council's strategic plan. So we're identifying how this strategy, directly aligns with council's strategic plan. So it makes a lot of sense for them to do it. So there was a lot of buy-in. And as I mentioned, we retained Janice, who helped us with the London Phragmites management strategy. We had the working group, as I mentioned, and these are some of the benefits that came out of that. Here's that map that I talked about, the sub-watershed-based approach with the priority there up in the north, and then following the branches of the Thames River. And this is well underway with control by a number of contractors, but primarily by the Invasive Phragmite Control Center led by Janice Gilbert, who does amazing work for us in mapping and reports. And we rely on them heavily along with other contractors. And we're grateful for all of the work by everyone because it's such a big project, and important that we leverage all the resources that we can. We even have the Service London portal. It's the same place where you go to report a pothole. You can report your Phragmites. There's the link there, servicelondon.ca, and you can drop a pin on a map to report Phragmites. There's a bit of a disclaimer with it. Just because it's been reported doesn't mean that same year it's necessarily going to be treated, but it certainly helps us at a high level identifying the Phragmites in the city. I think Janice recently mapped most of the Phragmites on the roads for us, and we have a clear path forward to continue treating the Phragmites in the roadsides. We're well into this, many years into this project now, of the Phragmites, for example. Every year, city staff attend or present at the Ontario Phragmites Working Group annual meeting. I would encourage anyone on the line to join that group. It's fun, it's low key. We can, smile and laugh and compare war stories about treating Phragmites. It's not a lot of requirements or very onerous to participate. You get a lot out of it attending those yearly meetings. The Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, under that contract they have with the city, they were participating in the Phragmites Adaptive Management Program. That's a science-based program that helps with decision points about what next steps should be for managing Phragmites, for example. I think they did several years of that. I don't think they're a part of it anymore, but it was good to participate in the science aspect, and it's a great learning piece if you ever see workshops about that. We recently met with the Middlesex County Roads and Forestry staff in 2020, I guess it was a year ago now, and they had a number of interesting insights. And as our immediate neighbor, it's important that everyone is working together collaboratively to prevent those vectors from spreading into and out of the city. And I won't read what they said, but these were some of the findings from that meeting. This is that mapping from the Lower Thames Conservation Group, who offered to split costs with us, and they retained a contractor, managed the project, did the mapping, did some letters to neighbors to say, hey, you've got frag, we're going to be in the area, would you like us to also treat the frag on your lands? And it was a very successful project. They went and did touch-ups the following year, and it was all at very low cost and low staff time to the city, just because we reached out to them and said that we were interested in managing frag through that process that Janice led. This was one of the gifts that arrived on our door. And I love this picture of the gentleman spraying the city sign treating that frag. It's a great photo. Here's the mapping of the environmentally significant areas in London as our highest quality, largest natural areas. These are really the priority areas for protection and that early detection piece and treating invasives in the city. So Phragmites treatment and ESAs, I think, began in 2013, and most of the cells on dry land have been treated and are monitored, and those in standing water are cut to drown. One large patch was even tarped, which there's a video on YouTube on the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority's YouTube page about that. So we're very grateful for the work that they do to control the highest priority species in the city, and that's Phragmites in our highest quality, largest natural areas, to make sure that they're as frag-free as they can be. And once the PMRA approves that chemical for treating frag in standing water, we will likely be able to get to the rest of the frag and really be frag-free in the environmentally significant areas, publicly owned ones in London, and that would be amazing. But again, we're very grateful to all our partners who work so hard and are so innovative to help us battle our priority invasive species here in the city. So as I mentioned, that reporting tool is live on the city website. We've done all of these projects that I mentioned. Another innovative one is that right now we only have dog strangling vine, for the most part, in one of our environmentally significant areas. And we identified that there were vectors coming from the dam up at the Upper Thames and flowing down the Thames River all the way to the Adelaide Pollution Control Plant. So we hired a contractor to help us manage dog strangling vine from the dam down to the pollution control plant the last 2 years. He'll probably be going out again this year to do further touch-ups, but it's really important to control those vectors of a known population. So we're pretty excited that we're on top of those vectors. We're also treating dog strangling vine with a biological control. We're working with Silvicon with the I'm going to forget the name of the biocontrol, but it doesn't matter. We use all the tools in the toolbox here in London. We have volunteers who, manually remove dog strangling vine. We have contractors in the Upper Thames who apply chemical to it. And we also now have the biocontrol and monitoring in place for dog strangling vine at Kaleli Meadows ESA. And as far as early detection, that's another example. We had hired a consultant to do an ecological inventory of Kelly Stanton environmentally significant area, and while they were out doing that work, they saw dog strangling vine and they removed it and the root as an example of all the different people coming together to make a difference here in the city, so to prevent outbreaks. And we have also asked the public to report dog strangling vine when they see it. So we're pretty on top of that one, except for our known population that we're fighting really hard with all the tools in the toolbox to manage at Kaleli there. So we also, in all of our environmental assessments or environmental impact studies, have comments about managing Phragmites prior to construction. And this is going pretty well. It makes a lot of sense not to be spreading it around the project areas. And we don't really manage frag on private lands for the most part, but we will, if we are in the area, offer to do a small area if it's going to make a difference between a cell being eradicated or not. We like to have fun and keep it light. I sign up for these emails with the Great Lakes Phragmites group. They have these fun fake frag headlines. I think it's every other Friday. And it kind of brightens my day on a Friday. I love these little cartoons that they do. It's worth signing up for their emails to keep on top of the latest research and opportunities with Phragmites. We report out in the London Plan progress report, and we report out on Council's strategic plan a number of metrics on how we're doing as far as controlling invasive species in the city. And 3 of the 5 priority species in the London Invasive Plant Management Strategy, including frag, knotweed, and hogweed, have in large part been addressed in all of the ESAs, as I mentioned, except for that frag in standing water, which we're working on. But buckthorn is still a big problem across the city, but we're continuing to work away at it. We do some pretty innovative, cool projects. Behind the Tourism Center, Westminster Ponds, environmentally significant area. There's a 4-hectare area that was just about solid buckthorn with dead ash overstory in 2016. It was an innovative project with grants from the federal government, where we did wintertime mulching of the buckthorn and the dead ash, save and except for anything native that was remaining on the site. And it's responding really well, and native species are now dominant. So we're very proud of projects like that. We also are recognized for habitat protection and contributions to the recovery strategy for false rue anemone in Canada. We had a multi-year management and monitoring project to protect the false rue from gout weed in the valley, and the project is going really well, and the numbers every year are increasing of false rue in the valley. We protect habitat for species at risk in London, controlling buckthorn and other woody invasives in our open grassland habitats in environmentally significant areas and other areas, improves habitat for these grassland birds, along with stewardship and native plantings, and of course those environmental assessments and environmental impact studies that I spoke about, and the recommendations and carrying those through. So we're very grateful to the Invasive Species Center. We invited them to come to a workshop we had a couple of years ago for the Kalali Meadows Ecological Restoration Plan, and they wrote us a nice letter commending us for being the first city to have an invasive species strategy. And we shared that letter with our advisory committees of council and with council. So it's nice to get those little pat on the backs when you can, and share those with council who are, going the extra mile and improving this stuff and providing funding. So it's nice to be able to circle back and say, hey, look, we're getting some external recognition for this. Same with the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, who wrote nice things about us in an article. And again, we like to share those to kind of cheer everyone along and keep the momentum going. The Invasive Species Center collected a lot of data, and I spent about a week or so collecting data from various departments in the city to look at how much money was being spent across the city on invasive species, and it was a lot more than I had really thought. So you can see that it's very costly, and the cost just grows if things aren't treated. So it's good that we are, since 2006, working away at this. In the long term, it will pay off. There was some interesting statistics and mapping about what's being spent across Ontario on it. You can see the orange there at the bottom. That's the southwestern Ontario. And you can see that the average expenditure for municipalities in southwestern Ontario is $172,000. and about $127,000 per conservation authority, which is lower than the other areas for the most part. And here you can see Phragmites spending. Orange again is the municipalities, and the blue is the conservation authorities. So that was interesting too. But most of you just want to thank everyone for all the help that you give us as a municipality, all our volunteers, all our contractors, all our consultants, and the groups, the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, the Invasive Species Center, the Early Detection Rapid Response folks, everyone who works together collaboratively to make a difference, and we couldn't do it without you. So I'm very grateful for your time today, and I think that's everything I have.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Linda. It's great to have London and Ontario to look at for invasive species management as other municipalities strive to be as forward as you guys are. So I'll switch it over to myself. All right, so our next presenter is Robert McGowan. Robert graduated from Fleming College with a Fish and Wildlife Technologist diploma and continued his education by obtaining his BSc honors degree from Trent University. Robert's passion for the outdoors has led him to a career in the environmental field, where for the past 15 years he has gained valuable experience while employed with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, Credit Valley Conservation, Trent University, and Fleming College. For the past 7 years, Robert has worked as the management technician at the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters, where he is the lead for the monitoring, surveillance, and control of the water soldier population on the Trent-Severn waterway and private ponds across Ontario. Water soldier was first detected in the wild in Ontario in 2008. Since this time, the Water Soldier Working Group has been actively monitoring and managing this population. This presentation will follow the early detection and rapid response efforts put forward by the working group. All right, Robert, you should be good to share your screen.
Thanks, Sarah.
No worries.
Hello, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well today. It's nice to be here, and thank you for having me. Today, we're just going to cover a quick case study on a water soldier that was reported to be in Red Horse Lake, which is a lake in eastern Ontario, north of Gananoque, in August of 2020. So today, we'll cover what water soldier is quickly. We're not going to get too deep into the weeds, so to speak. There's lots of information out there on our website, the Invasive Species Awareness Program website, that you can find that information at. We're going to concentrate on the new detection of water soldier in Ontario, the early detection, responding during COVID-19, the rapid response efforts that were taken, the treatment, and how we're going to move forward from this point. So what is water soldier? Water soldier is an invasive perennial aquatic plant that is native to Europe and Northwest Asia. The first known wild population in North America was found in the Trent River in 2008, near the hamlet of Trent River. Water soldier is used as an ornamental plant in water gardens, which is the likely source of its introduction into our natural waterways. The second wild population was discovered in the Black River in 2015 in Sutton, Ontario, and that's a tributary off of Lake Simcoe. Why is water soldier a problem? It forms dense mats of floating or submerged vegetation. It crowds out our native vegetation, resulting in decreased plant biodiversity. It has a potential to alter surrounding water chemistry, which may harm phytoplankton and other aquatic organisms. The dense floating mats of water soldier can hinder recreational activities such as boating, angling, and swimming. And the sharp serrated leaf edges can cut swimmers and anybody who handles a plant. So you should take caution when you are handling the plant. Okay, so the Red Horse Lake Water Soldier Report. So on August 27th, hotline. Oh, I'm muted. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback. So August 27th, 2020. The Invasive Species Awareness Program hotline received a report of water soldier on Red Horse Lake, north of Gananoque. A concerned citizen noticed a plant in the lake that he was not familiar with. He did some research and determined it was water soldier. The citizen then decided to contact the Invading Species Awareness Program hotline and report what he thought was water soldier. The ISAP staff required that the citizen send pictures, and when the pictures were received, it was confirmed that the plant was water soldier. So simultaneously, when we got the report on the same day, MNRF also received a sighting report of water soldier at the same location via social media. Because it referenced the possibility of an intentional release of water soldier, which is prohibited and illegal to deposit or release under the Invasive Species Act, MNRF communicated to the reporter that this should be reported to the MNRF tips line, and it was. And that's the photo the gentleman sent in from the report on Red Horse Lake. So Red Horse Lake, if anybody really doesn't know where it is, it's located in eastern Ontario, halfway between Toronto and Montreal. It's 24 kilometers north of Highway 401 and the Thousand Islands International Bridge. It is located between the villages of Lyndhurst and Lansdowne. Red Horse Lake is one of a 28-kilometer long chain of lakes that comprises the upper Gananoque River system. So you can imagine the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters is based out of Peterborough. So this is about a 3-hour drive for us to get there, and it makes for for a long day of 6 hours commuting. So we try to make the most of when we're on the water there. So Red Horse Lake is also in very close proximity to Charleston Lake Provincial Park. It's just a few kilometers to the east. So we're responding during COVID. My staff and I had already been in the field for most of the summer, monitoring the Trent-Severn waterway for water soldier. So we had been following all the COVID-related restrictions and precautions. Field safety protocols and amendments were mandatory for each site visit to Red Horse Lake. Precautions such as self-assessments were done on a daily basis. Mandatory masks were worn while traveling in vehicles. Keeping a distance of 6 feet apart, and sanitation equipment were done on a daily basis. Tasks were assigned at the beginning of each day, and they did not change to avoid any cross-contamination. All vehicles and equipment would be sanitized at the end of each day, and information such as emergency contacts were provided, and phone numbers and addresses to the hospitals and local health units were on hand, and this was information readily available in case anybody was feeling ill while traveling. So our first steps to the response. Our first step in a positive identification of a priority invasive species like water soldier is to contact the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. This was done in a video conference. Meeting was set up to discuss how we'll move forward with this newly discovered infestation. The decision was made that OFAH would conduct a site visit to assess the size and density of the water soldier populations. And because water soldier is listed as invasive species, a priority species on the Invasive Species Act, and there was a possibility of an intentional release, a conservation officer from Kemptville District MRF was also present with the OFAH at Red Horse Lake to conduct his own investigation. So landowner assistance. So when we arrived at Red Horse Lake, we were met by a local business owner who owns a cottage resort on Red Horse Lake. He's the same gentleman that reported the water soldier to the Invasive Species Awareness hotline. He greeted us and was very accommodating, and he was allowed us to access the only boat launch on the lake through his resort. And he also provided us with accommodations while we were performing our site visits. It's pretty isolated resort. There's not much around. This gentleman's name is Chuck. He was also very keen to guide us around the lake and help us search for the plants during our surveillance. We'd like to thank Chuck for his knowledge of the lake and his hospitality. And I think people like Chuck that get involved are very important in kind of these rapid response initiatives and the early detection of these plants, because obviously he has a vested interest in the lake, and it really helps us out when we get there and we have somebody with that knows the lay of the land and can guide us a bit. So our first site visit. So this site visit was to inform us of the size, density, and number of water soldier populations that we would have to plan to manage with the hopes of eradication. Although the population was a bit larger than we initially thought, there was only one population. And you can see in this picture on the left here, you see this dock here, and this is the population of water soldier right there. That's the emergent part of it, and there's a more submergent towards the forefront of the picture. So we made contact with the landowner adjacent to the population, and the conservation officer kind of led that conversation, and he was asking the landowner if they knew how the plant got there or how long it had been there, and they really didn't know. So I personally estimate that this water soldier population has probably been there for more than one growing season. It's a pretty sizable population, so I estimate maybe 2 to 3 years. So we provided the landowners with information about water soldier and why it was so serious that it was present there. Gave them a bit of background on what's happened in the Trent-Severn waterway. And we exchanged contact information with them. At that point, the conservation officer determined that there was no violation that occurred. And basically we went after leaving the landowner's property, and we just kind of looked around and did some more surveillance and picked up a few rogue plants from the shore, downstream shoreline. And we were discussing it with the conservation officer, and we concluded that there would probably have to be some response action to contain or hopefully eradicate the populations, and to prevent the further spread of any plants downstream. So MNRF and OFH asked the landowners not to disturb the plants, as we're going to return and take some management actions. So the rapid response. After the first site visit, further discussion between OFH and MNRF and the Invasive Species Center led to discussion to treat the water soldier population with herbicide. This decision was made with help from previous experience with the infestations of water soldier on Trent-Severn Waterway, on the Black River, and a dozen or so private ponds across Ontario. Quick action and collaboration led to the eradication of water soldier in the Black River in 2016. We're optimistic that we can see the same results. So following this videocon, and a control and eradication plan was developed by OFH and endorsed by the MNRF, and it was submitted to the Invasive Species Center for support from the Rapid Response Fund. And our return to Red Horse Lake. So on September 15th, OFH returned to Red Horse Lake to install a barrier that would contain the main water soldier population. This barrier was to be installed to prevent wave action from disturbing the plants during a significant wind event or from boat wake, which would aid in the spread and dislodge the plants from the main population. So when we got there, unfortunately, the water soldier population was in water a bit too deep. We didn't capture the whole population the first time we were there. It was a bit of an overcast day, and when we returned, it was sunny, so we could see further into the water column. So we abandoned the barrier installation, and we just began to survey the immediate area, removing any scattered plants that are found from the main population. And you can see on the picture on the right here, that's my colleague Brooke Schreier. He's very keen on getting into the water and removing the water soldier. It was pretty chilly that day, so I wasn't getting in the water. So on that same site visit, we delineated the population of water soldier to prepare for the treatment. There was a buffer that was added to the original survey, and this has been recommended by the professionals that we consulted with in the past. The reason for this is to provide enough residency time for the herbicide to be effective in systems with flowing water. So Red Horse Lake is part of the Gananoque River system, and certain times a year has pretty significant flow. So we just wanted to make sure that we're making sure that if we were going to treat this with herbicide, we were going to do it correctly. Here we go. So permitting requirements. So the OFH sourced out 3 quotes from herbicide applicators and received 3 responses and chose the most reasonably priced quote. The herbicide applicator is responsible to obtain the permit to perform a water extermination. During this application process, it was recognized that the presence of species at risk was a possibility. The potential presence of species at risk required working with MECP, species at risk biologists, and the MNRF to provide guidance on mitigation measures to ensure that there would be no impact of the control work on these species. They were extremely helpful in providing timely advice to enable the herbicide application to be conducted within the short timing window available for herbicide treatment in the fall. We had some time constraints in the fall with it quickly approaching, and due to requirements on the reward label for applications to be performed above a temperature threshold. So we wanted to ensure we were within this threshold, not only to be compliant with the label restrictions, but to also make sure that we're giving the herbicide the best chance to be effective. The reward label states that applications should be made to actively growing weeds, and fortunate for us, water soldier is an evergreen and has a longer growing season than our native plants do. So even when we were treating in the Trent-Severn Waterway, we'd usually typically wait to the fall to treat because our native plants have already stored their starches and kind of gone dormant for the year and they've died back. And usually it's most of your cottagers have gone home and we're not impeding anybody's recreation. So the herbicide treatment. So on Thursday, October 8th, 2020, OFH met the herbicide applicator at Red Horse Lake. OFH and the applicator reviewed the additional conditions set out on site, outlined by the MNRF and outlined on the pesticide permit issued by the MECP. So 0.5 hectares of water soldier was treated and the application took approximately 45 minutes. So how are we going to move forward? So in the spring of 2020, OFH will return to Red Horse Lake and assess the efficacy of the herbicide application. We'll be planning on what surveillance and monitoring will look like for the 2021 field season. And we'll move forward with plans to implement management actions if we weren't successful in eradicating the whole population. We'll continue to spread our outreach and education to the residents of Red Horse Lake and the Gananoque watershed and engage the public and local conservation groups to help identify new sightings and prevent the introduction and further spread of water soldier in the watershed. And this seems to be something that's mentioned in all of the presentations so far, collaboration. I think it's so important. I've been working on the Water Soldier project for the past 7 years, and I'm proud of all the achievements that we made together. We have worked together collaboratively towards the goal to eradicate water soldier from Ontario and help to prevent new introductions. We have learned from our previous years and applied those lessons to the next. The Red Horse Lake infestation highlights our knowledge and commitment to our goal of eradication of water soldier in Ontario. And I'm very optimistic that if we continue the path we're on, the eradication of water soldier in Ontario is very much achievable. So our experience in collaboration has allowed us to implement this rapid response. And I think that, everybody's been involved in the project since 2008. I'd like to thank everybody for all their efforts. And hopefully we were successful in eradicating water soldier from Red Horse Lake.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Rob. I'm glad we have you guys on the ground getting rid of that because I live in the Kingston area and I definitely don't want to get cut by one of those. Awesome. Okay, so our next presenter is Valerie Minelga. And let me get this going here. Hi, Valerie. Just going to show my screen quick.
Hi, Mackenzie.
Sarah.
Oh, Sarah, sorry.
That's okay.
I just saw Mackenzie's name in the list there, so I don't know what she looks like.
I'm in the background here, Valerie.
Yeah, she's the brains behind this whole situation. Okay. So, let me give your intro here. So, Valerie is the manager of the Environmental Services and Ontario Waterways at Parks Canada. Valerie is a wildlife biologist by education, but has spent the last 15 years of her career working across Parks Canada sites in Ontario, studying and managing many invasive species and species at risk. She started her career at Point Pelee National Park, where 37% of species are exotic or invasive, learning to manage Phragmites, hyperabundant double-crested cormorants, English ivy, periwinkle, and so many more. She now leads the Ontario Waterways Environmental Services team and has taken on new challenges of water soldier and water chestnut. This presentation will give an overview of the Trent-Severn Waterway and Rideau Canal National Historic Sites, the new Environmental Services team, and what they currently manage and hope to manage in the future. It outlines 2 of the ongoing control programs for water soldier in the TSW and water chestnut in the Rideau, and the tools they're employing to prioritize these resources across 2 vast systems. So I can switch it over to you, Valerie, and you can get started. Let me know if you have trouble sharing your screen.
Thank you, Sarah. I know Mackenzie and I practiced this earlier.
Yeah, so if you go, you had your share, yep, there's your screen. And if you just start your presentation. Looks good to me. Oh,
Let me just give my screen a sec to stop
yeah,
flickering. So can you guys see the presentation all right?
Yeah,
Or
you're
do you
in
see
the editor
still?
view right now, though.
All right, this was the issue we had earlier.
No worries. If you just go to
So,
slideshow.
It is in slideshow.
Hmm.
I'm just going to stop sharing. And I saved it as a PDF for exactly this reason.
Had to happen to one of you.
Yeah, it was, oh, you know what it is? I am still on my government network, which was the issue when we tested it earlier. Sorry, everyone. Technical difficulties, I feel, is.
We're doing fine for time, so no worries.
Okay, I should be back.
Okay, so now if you press show your screen. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, can you see the presentation mode?
Yes, we can.
Okay, can you just see the main slide?
No, oh, black.
Here, now you should be able to see the intro slide.
Yep, I see that. Just the intro slide. You're good to go.
Perfect. All right, sorted it out. Glad we practiced this morning. So thanks, Sarah, for that introduction. Like Sarah said, my name is Valerie Minelga, and I'm the manager for what we call Ontario Waterways at Parks Canada. So the Ontario Waterways is part of a large network of national historic sites that Parks Canada manages across Eastern Canada. So there's actually 9 historic canals in Ontario, Quebec, and Nova Scotia. Oops, sorry, getting used to these controls here. Having issues here.
Is it
Sorry,
not
guys.
switching slides?
Switching slides, but I can't scroll through my notes. So that's okay. I will speak off from what I remember. So like I said, Parks Canada manages kind of a large network of national historic sites across Eastern Canada. And these sites are managed for the cultural and commemorative integrity for which they were set aside as national historic sites. So that's mainly through navigation and protection of kind of the historical features and assets for which they were originally recognized. However, they often encounter kind of modern day problems for which kind of the nature of their being set aside for National Historic Site protection in the first place then means they've been refuges for natural features, biodiversity, species at risk, kind of competing user interests, shoreline development, other development proposals across both systems. So they're often very complex and complicated systems, which are kind of moved beyond the original purpose for which they were designated and set aside in the first place. So on this map, you can see the Rideau Canal in red and the Trent-Severn from Kingston to Port Severn. So when I say Ontario Waterways, our group actually manages both those systems. So the Rideau Canal, which some of you may know, runs from Ottawa to Kingston. It's just over 200 kilometers long and is actually also designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its cultural but also natural features along the corridor. It's also designated a Canadian Heritage River, and it actually spans 2 watersheds. So the watershed divide is just south of Big Rideau Lake at Newborough Lock Station. So everything from Newborough north towards Ottawa flows towards Ottawa and the Ottawa River, and everything to the south of Newborough flows towards Kingston and the St. Lawrence River. It has 2 reservoir lakes in the system, which aren't highlighted on this map, but are off to kind of the left-hand side there in the middle. And it has 40 dams and 24 lock stations that are spread along its length. It also has 5 hydro plants in the system. And it also has its own historic site within the historic site, which is the Merrickville Blockhouse. The Trent-Severn, on the other hand, is nearly 400 kilometers long. And you'll see in this photo, the blue line is kind of the through main navigation channel that people are familiar with. It spans actually 7 watersheds. You can see it a bit in this map. There's gray lines that kind of highlight the different watersheds that the system crosses. And it actually has 143 dams, 40 of which are on the reservoir lakes. So you'll see on this map, kind of in the northern end where you see Haliburton, Minden, and Kinmount kind of north of the blue line. Those are actually all the reservoir lakes that feed into the Trent-Severn system and kind of maintain water levels throughout the navigation season. So Parks Canada kind of controls the lands and waters on that main blue line and only controls the dams in those reservoir lakes, whereas the M&R manages the lakes and the riverbed in that reservoir area. There are roughly 18 hydro plants that are scattered throughout the system. And there's also 2 national historic sites within this historic waterway, the Peterborough Lift Lock and the Magickaning Fish Weirs closer to Orillia. So what do we do? Ontario Waterways kind of manages a wide variety of aspects across both systems. So that includes navigation, water management, visitor service offers, land use planning and permitting for kind of development along the shoreline of both systems, asset management, and natural and cultural resource protection. Parks Canada also manages the hydro generation across both systems under the Hydropower Dominion Act, which is something that most users may not know. So while the waterways don't fall under the Canada National Parks Act and aren't mandated to protect ecological integrity like you may have in a national park that you might be familiar with when you hear about Parks Canada, we do still have conservation responsibilities under different acts, mainly through the Historic Canal Regulations, the Species at Risk Act, and the Impact Assessment Act being kind of the main ecological protection mechanisms in the system. So being almost 600 kilometers long across the 2 systems, there's over 110 species at risk that find their home in both waterways. We also manage 2 large projects that have been in the system for the past few years. So Water Soldier on the Trent-Severn, like Rob mentioned, and Water Chestnut on the Rideau Canal. So Parks Canada also does aquatic vegetation management. Particularly, we receive a large number of applications from cottage owners or waterfront property owners for aquatic vegetation removal. We work with Indigenous partners for the management of monomen or wild rice. We also play an important role in fish and fish habitat protection, particularly when it comes to water management to protect spawning activity in the spring. And because both systems, especially the Rideau, run through kind of that agricultural and urban interfaces across both systems, there is kind of a history of contamination at some locations along both spots. So we have kind of 9 active contaminated sites under the Federal Contaminated Sites Program, with 5 kind of having active ongoing work right now. We also kind of oversee the research and collections permits, so university projects typically that conduct research across both systems. And a large part of our work is also environmental impact assessment. So anytime there's any type of activity, it's our responsibility under the various acts to ensure that there's no significant adverse environmental effects that come along with those project proposals. So kind of these vast systems, these kind of waterways that were originally set aside for national historic sites that were built originally for navigation or military defense, kind of come with their own unique challenges. Kind of like is mentioned here, the waterways were originally constructed in a manner that both contributed to fragmentation, so new dams or locks were put up where there used to be connections, but also new connections were created in both systems. So these could be both desirable connections, you know, in the last 100 years that allowed for movement between lakes where there were none, but also undesirable connections, because these kind of 2 systems that span central Ontario almost become a potential highway for invasion into Ontario's inland waters. Because kind of the history of both waterways being created, which you know, did have existing lakes and rivers as part of the system, but may have included things like flooding or the connections or fragmentation that occurred. We also are challenged by a lot of legacy issues. So water quality and particularly high nutrient loading in kind of flooded lands as kind of that legacy of the system being created. From those first 2 maps, you can also imagine it is a very large management area for a small team with limited resources. My team is made up of 5 people that's split between Peterborough, the Trent-Severn headquarters, and Smith Falls, the Rideau headquarters. So there's a lot of kind of large challenges and priorities and kind of competing interests, and not a lot of people to tackle them. We're also, though, very blessed that there is a large number of kind of stakeholder land managers that border the federal waterway or canal that also collect kind of a variety of information and inputs in the larger watershed itself. There's a number of conservation authorities, lake stewardship groups, lake associations that are scattered along the length of both systems. We also have the challenge that we get a lot of applications, a lot of projects on a small scale basis. So a lot of individual projects that come to us along that 600 kilometers that, you know, are looking for review or input on a very small scale by 100 meters by 30 meters. And so kind of tracking and understanding cumulative effects across the system is something that we definitely struggle with, and that you'll see has been the focus for us as we try and tackle kind of priorities across the system. Because both systems connect kind of a large swath of inland area in Ontario, they also cross a variety of habitats. So, in Ottawa and Kingston, more in Ottawa, the canal cut, is the man-made canal cut that crosses right downtown Ottawa. But then you can cross sections of the Trent-Severn or the Rideau where they're not developed at all, have kind of more a traditional undisturbed aquatic ecosystem or terrestrial ecosystem. And then something that a lot of kind of land and water managers that are struggling with over the past few years is climate change. So we manage a system where there's a vast network of data and resources that's been collected over the last 100 years to make water management or management decisions across the system that are no longer becoming reliable to predict the future. That as we get into kind of expected scenarios of flood and drought and extreme events, that only goes to then exacerbate the environmental challenges that we face across the system. So I wanted to kind of give an overview of the Trent-Severn and the Rideau, one to just introduce ourselves because we've kind of had limited capacity at Parks Canada, at the Trent-Severn and the Rideau since 2012, and we've kind of been building our team since 2015 to kind of slowly transition to pick up some of these larger system files and challenges that face the Trent and the Rideau. So our team was originally hired in 2015 under the federal infrastructure program to deal with the infrastructure, large dam and lock rehab and replacement projects. And it's only been since 2019 that we've started to integrate into the larger operational management team for the Trent and the Rideau. So as a result of kind of this environmental capacity gap at the Trent and the Rideau, we were very lucky that a lot of our partners stepped up to fill the gap. And kind of in that gap were two significant projects that kind of began with the original Trent-Severn team, but really took off and had kind of significant management actions and results that began before our team kind of took back over the field unit file. So two of those, like I mentioned, is the Water Chestnut project on the Rideau, which began in 2014 with Ducks Unlimited Canada and Rideau Valley Conservation Authority when it was first detected at Black Rapids. And then the other on the Trent-Severn Waterway, which Rob mentioned, was the Water Soldier project, which was first detected in 2008 and was largely managed or led by the MNR and OFAH, but also in support of Lower Trent Conservation Authority and Parks Canada. So I wanted to touch on these two projects, but I know Rob and Holly have certainly spoken at this forum before, so I didn't want to focus on kind of the traditional what the projects are and what we've been working, but more focus on kind of the two ongoing programs and where we are kind of at in our response timeline and where we need to move to, kind of having had, like Rob mentioned, great success in kind of application and control of these two invasive species. So for water soldier, like I mentioned, the program began in 2008. Sorry, getting notifications on my screen. The program began in 2008 with the first detection of water soldier in the Trent-Severn, which was the first one in North America. And so some time was spent kind of researching the life history, doing surveillance, understanding what kind of tools and applications would work on water soldier and how to best control or deal with this species that was new to the waterway and to Ontario. So this work kind of occurred up until 2014 when the MNR and OFH, supported by Parks Canada, really started to get into kind of large scale control of the infestation. During this time, unfortunately, the invasion had spread downstream over the years as kind of we got a handle on what control methods and what we could actually do to control the species. And while the program has been a great success over the last 5 years, and I'll show you a couple slides of Lake Seymour at the top there of just how much of a change has happened in the system. Our area of control is spread, and this is a map from 2020 in terms of distribution, to over 55 kilometers in length. So we've really had to kind of take a step back in the system and kind of reevaluate where we're at in terms of water soldier control. In 2015, kind of the original, or 2017, sorry, the original management plan was written with kind of a purpose of eradicating water soldier in the province in 5 years. With kind of that management plan, we started that population control in 2014, and we're actually able to leverage funds across and be able to treat the entire infestation from Lake Seymour to Glen Ross for entire population control. So just to kind of give you, this is only one of those 4 management areas in the Trent-Severn, but to give you an idea of just how successful herbicide control has been in the system, this was kind of the state of invasion in Lake Seymour in 2015, which totaled roughly 162.5 hectares in this kind of one infestation zone. Through kind of multiple years of large-scale herbicide control, we were now sitting in 2020 with kind of a significant population reduction in Lake Seymour from that 162.5 down to only, just over 13.5 hectares. So while this is, made Holly, Rob, and I very happy and very kind of confident in the program that we were pushing to still have a goal of eradication of water soldier in the system, it led us kind of with this unique challenge of having this large area of control that was left. So this is a typical kind of grid square point intercept method that you might have seen in previous presentations for water soldier. So just to remind you, this is still just Lake Seymour, one of the kind of those 4 population areas for water soldier in the Trent-Severn. And each kind of infestation area is broken into this 50 by 50 grid squares where a value is taken at each kind of intercept point where each grid meets. And at that point, a value is assessed for water soldiers. So kind of the low or level 1 scale is a single plant, so that's yellow in those previous maps that you've seen. Kind of the medium infestation rate is scattered plants, so the orange you would have seen in the previous slides, and the third kind of level is a dense colony of water soldier. So this was kind of a great monitoring protocol that was set up for water soldier in order to kind of cover that vast area of infestation that happened in the Trent-Severn. However, it comes with some drawbacks. One of those being is that it is a 50 by 50 grid square. So as we, just to flip back, as we get into really the successful control and as we get into the successful control and sorry, it says my screen sharing is paused. Can everybody still see the slides?
We can, Valerie. It's just we're running out of time for your presentation, unfortunately.
Okay, no worries. So to kind of get through what we focused on for what we targeted was to do these kind of near shore surveys in order to really target the remaining infestation areas that were left for a water soldier, to really be able to hunt down those remnant populations so that we can actually start reducing the area of infestation. So we flew those near shore target areas. 2020 was the first year we tested it with drone surveys with the Phantom 4 and Maverick at kind of 150 to 150 foot elevation. And using kind of drone deploy to stitch the images in order to see if we could detect water soldier at that kind of really rapid response detection in order to kind of target our application areas as we got into control in the fall. So this is a tool that we tested in 2020 and was very successful for water soldier, and something that we're hoping to employ on the Rideau for water chestnut this year. We're very lucky to flip back in water soldier that is very unique in color and structure, that is able to detect it kind of for that rapid assessment with the drone tools. So we'd like to test kind of the same thing on the Rideau with water chestnut to be able to see if we kind of can reduce the level of effort across these kind of large, vast areas in both systems in order to facilitate kind of a faster targeted control system to kind of reduce monitoring in areas that take a lot of time through kind of access issues, shallow areas, equipment. So
Okay,
maybe I'll
Valerie,
end there.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to cut you off.
Yeah, so sorry, we wasted a bit of time there with messing around with getting things started. So maybe
Exactly.
I'll end there. That kind of gives an overview of the rapid assessment tools we've been trying to employ for water soldier and water chestnut. I will kind of leave, maybe share this presentation with Mackenzie that touches on some of our prioritization and research that is going in to support invasive species management across the system, so that kind of interested users can kind of see the details about these other initiatives that we've employed.
That would be great. So thank you very, very much for your presentation. And I'm going to introduce our next speaker now. So our next speaker is Brenda Conley. Brenda is a National Operational Specialist with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. She previously served as a program officer with the CFIA's local office in St. Catharines. Throughout her 20+ years with CFIA, she has worked on several invasive species projects, including plum pox virus, Asian longhorn beetle, jointed goatgrass, and currently Japanese Stiltgrass. She graduated with a BSc in biology from Brock University. Japanese Stiltgrass is a new invasive plant to Ontario that threatens the survival of native plant species in the areas it is found. Controlling the spread of this invasive plant requires a quick response from everyone involved, including all levels of government, landowners, the public, and researchers. In this presentation, you will learn how developing strong relationships between these groups aids in the control of a regulated invasive plant. Brenda, you should be the presenter now. Awesome. Good to go.
Great. All right. Thank you, Sarah. Yes, I'll be talking about the collaborative response to Japanese Stiltgrass. The presentation will give an overview of CFA's plant health mandate, our regulated invasive plants, partnerships, sharing information, pest biology, collaborative working group, as well as survey, looking at pest distribution, regulatory control, eradication with control options, and education outreach. So the CFA's plant protection mandate falls under the legislation of the Plant Protection Act and the Plant Protection Regulations. CFA is here to protect Canada's agriculture and forestry sectors and natural resources from economic and environmental impact of introduced pests, as well as to prevent the import, export, and spread of pests, and to regulate import, export, and domestic movement of agriculture and forestry products and other things, as well as we facilitate access to foreign markets following a phytosanitary perspective. CFIA's invasive alien species program contributes to the ongoing implementation of the National Invasive Species Strategy, which was founded in 2004. Invasive plants, like other regulated pests, like pathogens and insects, can present significant economic risk to producers, and the impeded entries such as increased production cost, increase input costs, reduce in yield and crop value, limit land use options, loss of pasture land, increase in processing costs, and there could be a loss of trade advantages and potential impact in market access. Prevention is the key so that we're not dealing with things later on that could be more costly. This is a list of 21 plant species regulated by the CFIA under the Plant Protection Act. This list can be found on our website and should be checked regularly, as additional plant species may be added based on the results of the pest risk analysis. So you can see here, we have Japanese Stiltgrass listed. From this list, there's different plant forms that are regulated. We have 7 species of grass plants, 3 species of climbing plants, 3 genera of parasitic plants, and 8 species of other herbaceous plants. So Japanese Stiltgrass, it is a shade-tolerant invasive annual. Its life cycle lasts 1 year, growing from seed each year, and it's found in grassy areas of forests, wetlands, damp fields, lawns, trails, and roadside ditches. Japanese Stiltgrass is a problem because it forms a dense monospecific stand that outcompetes native vegetation. It reduces regeneration of native wooded species and the overall biodiversity of ecosystems. Its prolific seed production and rapid growth helps it dominate entire habitats, edging out native vegetation. It can also displace nesting sites for birds and other wildlife. It may also cost producers due to the control costs and productivity losses. It's spread by fruits and seeds that are dispersed by water or attaching to clothing or animal fur. As well, birdseed, soil, nursery stock, hay, muddy tires, equipment, vehicles, seasonal flooding and footwear can also be a means of dispersal. The seeds can last in the soil for as long as 5 years and even possibly 7 years. The plant can grow up to 1 meter tall and have many branches. The leaf blades are thin, pale green, and tapered at both ends. The shiny midrib is considered the most distinguishing feature, and it's used to differentiate it from lookalikes early in the season. The stems are about 40 to 120 centimeters long and 1 to 1.5 millimeters thick. The lower portion of the plant is prostrate, while the upper portions of the flowering branches are erect. Its roots are globerous nodes. Leaf shades are shorter than internodes. Inflorescence are terminal racemes, which are 3 to 9 centimeters in length. And in the fall, it has a purple foliage. Some other distinct characteristics of Japanese stiltgrass: the spikelets and sessile pediculate pairs. Again, the pale green leaves have a shiny midrib and are 4 to 9 centimeters long and 5 to 50 millimeters wide. The lagoon is truncate shaped and it's 0.5 to 0.8 millimeters long and covered with hairs on the underside. It's well adapted to low light conditions. As well, the margins are sicklight. The US has developed a field guide for the identification of Japanese stiltgrass, which contains many lookalike species. 2 of the ones that we found are most lookalike are the North American native cutgrass. It has leaves that are longer and thinner than the stiltgrass and lacking the obvious midrib stripe. And you can see in this picture here, it has hairy nodes. The Lyrsura species has rhizomes and a pinnacle type inflorescence. Another lookalike is a North American native deer tongue panic grass. It's harder to pull and the leaf base is often collapsing around the stem, whereas Japanese stiltgrass, you can pull it out of the earth quite easily. So as mentioned before, through the CFIA, we regulate using our Plant Protection Act and regulations, and Japanese stiltgrass is on our regulated pest list. So we control the importation and the domestic movement of regulated plants in their propagative parts. Currently, Japanese stiltgrass is found native to Asia. The species is also naturalized in eastern US and continues to spread in the Northeast. It was first documented in the United States in 1918 in Tennessee, where it was introduced as packing material from imported porcelain from China. It may also have been transported through contaminated soil through the nursery and landscape industry. Up until 2019, it was not known to occur in Canada. However, we do have 2 populations that have now been reported in southern Ontario. The first population was found in southern Ontario in Short Hills Provincial Park in 2019. This was found by 2 field botanists, Corey Burke and Jessila Consillo. They contacted the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, who then contacted CFIA regarding a suspect find. Anytime the CFIA receives a suspect find of a regulated pest, we are required to take samples to get official results. In this case, we had inspectors go into the park with the GPS coordinates that were provided by the field botanists, collected some samples and sent them into our botany lab, and they were a positive identification for stiltgrass. These pictures are just showing the stiltgrass in the park in the winter time. That you can see it has these dense mats, almost like carpets, through the forest. Ontario Parks, since the find, they've been doing ongoing monitoring within the park. This park is a multi-trail use trail system, and the Bruce Trail does run through the park. So we have hikers using the park, mountain bikers, horseback riders. As well, there is a large deer population. So this map is from the Ontario Parks, from December of 2020. The first detection was in the northwest corner, but you can see with the ongoing survey work by Ontario Park staff, it is well established within the park. They continue to find outliers, all these small orange dots throughout the park, but their survey work still continues in this aspect. So the timeline so far with Japanese stiltgrass, as mentioned, it was found in 2019 in Short Hills Park. At that time, a working group was established with Ontario members. Treatment options were looked at as well. The CFIA surveyed 11 sites around the perimeter of the park, and there were 2 additional sites that were found just on the outskirts of the park along the Bruce Trail. Anytime a pest is found that is regulated, regulatory action is taken, and in this case, notices of prohibition of movement were issued. In 2020, educational outreach material was developed, as well as survey protocols, and there were 8 survey sites that were looked at within the Niagara region by the CFIA, and there were again 2 additional sites detected along the Bruce Trail. As well, our field botanists, Jessica and Corey, found 1 other site in Elgin County. For 2021, we are looking at management options, survey treatment within the park, as well as continued education and outreach and ongoing surveillance. Our collaborative working group consists of Ontario Parks, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, CFIA, as well as input from our citizen science. The purpose of our working group was to establish educational and outreach initiatives, eradication management options, information sharing, and surveillance. In 2020, the Japanese stiltgrass survey had an objective for detection and determination of the extent of the Japanese stiltgrass in the Niagara region. The emphasis was on high-risk areas around the known population. The timing of the survey took place late spring to early summer, and this would then inform the next steps for potential control actions. Survey priorities focused on where the seeds may have been dispersed from the known infestation. So we're looking at fields that were near to the park, trails, other recreation and natural tourist areas, shaded roadside ditches, forest woodlands, as well as looking at the foraging behaviors of deer, as they have a preference for Japanese stiltgrass as well. They also use this as a bedding area. So from the 2020 survey, as well as information from our field botanists, we were able to generate this map showing the 2 positive sites in Southern Ontario, as well as the blue triangles where the field botanists have looked for Japanese stiltgrass and it has not been found, and the green triangles represent CFA survey in 2020. Managing of Japanese stiltgrass, there's potential treatment options are herbicide application with reseeding with native species, mowing, hand pulling, controlled burn, and the treatment should be tailored to conditions present at the site and the available resources. Managing these excursions, we aim to contain and eradicate existing populations through surveillance and monitoring. Eradication requires 5 years of not detecting the Japanese stiltgrass plant. Treatment of infested areas based on site conditions and available resources, communication, and outreach. Ontario Parks has done a wonderful job at controlling and looking at every aspect that they can do within Short Hills Park. For control options, they've used glyphosate herbicide, and it was chosen for its efficacy and ease of use by applicators. They started applying this in the summer of 2020 and focused along boundaries and adjacent agriculture land and small, medium patches. The spraying was conducted by backpack sprayers, So crews would be working on foot to navigate the terrain, because there's a lot of fallen trees within the park, and there are quite slopes within the park as well. The backpack spraying method was also used to minimize the overspraying on non-target species. A mix of spot and fan spraying was conducted depending on the Japanese stiltgrass patch size. The treatment of the larger interior infestations will be dependent on resources. Fact sheets have been posted at the entrances to Short Hills Park. They've also put web alerts on their website, letting people know of Japanese stiltgrass and what they should do upon exiting the park. As well, they've been educating their staff. There was a webinar that was developed for Japanese stiltgrass as well as other invasive species. So ongoing work that is being completed at Short Hills Park. Site monitoring visits have showed that the glyphosate applications have been effective in controlling Japanese stiltgrass. Treatment will be continuing, and annual monitoring of treated areas will continue as well. They are continuing to distribute outreach and communication materials. The second detection was at the Tanger Track, which is located in Elgin County. It was a small population, and in this case, the treatment option was hand pulling, and then the plants were disposed. There will be ongoing monitoring activities for the next 5 years at this location. The working group has developed many different outreach materials and awareness options. There are pest cards for Japanese stiltgrass, which are small credit card sized cards, which are show the key distinction features of Japanese stiltgrass and are easily to be carried around. The fact sheets for Japanese stiltgrass, we have one that has the overview of the plant as well. We also have one of how to prevent the spread of Japanese stiltgrass, especially in the park with all the multi-users using it, making sure they clean their equipment, their clothing, even if they're in there with their dogs, that they're checking their fur for the seeds that could attach quite easily. As well, for general public, we have used different social media resources, especially with the Invasive Species Center. They've posted Twitter feeds about Japanese stiltgrass that we're thankful for, as well as members of the working group have been presenting information in sessions such as this to get the word out. Reporting suspect find. Any suspected regulated pest should be sent to the CFIA, and this can be through our Surveillance Canada email address. We just ask that you include your name, address, phone number, email contact information, location of the suspected pest, GPS coordinates, if you have that, are great. The actual signs and symptoms that you're seeing of the pest that you've observed, as well as photographs, are really great to send in to us so that we can follow up. The next steps with Japanese stiltgrass, we're continuing to develop and support communication prevention strategies to partners, stakeholders, and the public. Continue to engage our science citizens for new finds so we can get more of those hopefully blue triangles on our map. As well, CFIA detection surveys will continue across Canada and will address ongoing outreach and training needs. This is just a list of few of our websites. I had mentioned the list for Pest Regulated by Canada to be checked. We have various species of risk assessment, invasive plants and weed seed fact sheet, risk management documents, our plant health directives, and anyone looking for information on our import requirements, that would be our automated import reference system that you can find that information. As well, we also have invasive plant field guides that are available. And thank you for allowing us to discuss Japanese stiltgrass today.
Thank you very much for finishing off our presentations, Brenda. That was wonderful. And now we can start with questions, which is always fun. So our first question is to Rob. I am a cottager downstream from Red Horse Lake on Gan Lake. How soon will we know if the treatment was successful?
So that's a good question. We have only treated this population once. I'm not sure how far downstream you are. We have monitored or done our surveillance just past the Black Rapids. We haven't gone much further. Time was kind of an issue. We're going to better know this spring what the success of the treatment will look like, and I think that more surveillance needs to be done further downstream, especially with it being a flowing system.
Great, thanks. So our next question is just generally to anyone who wants to answer it. Eastern Ontario, like the Kawarthas, is an area of infestation of starry stonewort. Is anything being done towards educating the public about this extremely aggressive invasive species? Does anyone know anything about that?
If nobody else wants to answer, I have. It's everywhere. We've noticed over the last little while that starry stonewort has probably been misidentified as chara or muskgrass. I monitor about 55 kilometers of the Trent-Severn waterway from Highway 30 down to all the way into Bay of Quinte, and it's everywhere. What is going to be done about it? I don't know. We at the Invasive Species Awareness Program have started to follow it as an invasive. I'm not sure if there's going to be any control. I can't speak to that, but I know that in Canada, I don't believe that we have any herbicides that will really be effective on managing it. And I don't really know about many management activities that have gone on. So,
okay. Well, thanks for the response. That's unfortunate, but
yeah.
Our next question is also general. It's aquatic as well. The spread of aquatic invasive species is primarily through watercraft. What is being done to actively promote better watercraft practices, i.e. clean, drain, dry? So is there anything else other than clean, drain, dry?
At the Invasive Species Center, we're working on a lot of different campaigns ongoing. We focus on a lot of different taxa, but one of the taxa that we work on through some of our different channels through EDRR, the network, but also through our other programs that we run is the clean, drain, dry messaging in collaboration with partners. We promote resources that are currently in existence, run social media campaigns included as part of our aquatic invasive species outreach, as well as I know a lot of other partners are doing very similar things. So we do have aquatic invasive species as a top priority for education and outreach.
Thanks, Lauren. The next question is for Valerie. When Parks Canada becomes aware of a new invasive present in the system, what steps are taken to prevent spread throughout the system? Does Parks Canada make efforts to notify lake users, landowners, or organizations along the system so that they can be on the lookout for a new invasive species?
Yeah, so unfortunately we didn't get to the kind of 3 prioritization exercise. We don't yet have kind of a formal notification process to landowners for new invasive species. We do right now rely heavily on EDMAPs and kind of reporting to EDMAPs and the Invasive Species Center for new occurrences, and as well kind of reporting through our info and social media lines. We are kind of through the species at risk action planning process and some of the other activities, hoping to kind of launch social media campaigns this year, particularly for water soldier and water chestnut, because we do rely on EDMAPs to make sure that there's no infestations elsewhere in the system. If there is a species of concern that somebody is seeing in either system, then the best is to go on the Rideau or the Trent-Severn website and submit kind of the species and locations through the info emails that are on both those websites.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, Valerie. The next question is for Lauren. how does one go about getting the aggressive invasive starry stonewort on your radar? Still waiting to see it show up on your website after 3 years notice and decades of awareness by the TSW and Parks Canada. Looks like we have work to do, Lauren.
Yeah, so starry stonewort is a species that we're currently doing some campaigns and education and outreach on. We developed a poster and we're working in collaboration in the past with ISAP to get it added to, ISAP did add it to EdMaps for Ontario, so that was a really big step and really appreciative for all their work that they've done. It's a species that's part of our regular outreach and education campaign, and it is one that's on our radar. For early detection, it doesn't necessarily fall into that category for a lot of areas, but we do focus on inland lakes where it's not currently present to help promote early detection so that we don't have introduction of that species into areas where it's not currently. And then we focus for all aquatic species where they are currently present, like Eurasian water milfoil is another one, for example. We focus on how can you prevent being that vector of spread, and how is the actions that you're taking, how can you improve the water quality in your area if there are options, and then if not, what are some of the steps you can take to prevent being that vector of spread, for example, clean, drain, dry.
Awesome, thank you. And the next one's for you as well, Lauren. It's just a logistical question. Does the Eastern Ontario area include Carleton Place, Perth, Smith Falls? Specifically thinking about Carleton Place and Mississippi Lake. And if not, are there plans to expand into that area with EDRR?
Yes, it certainly does. So it actually does fall in as far as the grant is concerned, specifically Carleton Place, Mississippi Mills, Perth, they all fall within the catchment. The biggest city within the catchment is Kingston, but it goes all the way down to Belleville. The catchment is just as far as what the grant outlines for where we can work, but the network is Ontario-wide, so there's lots of opportunities outside of that catchment. But as far as those specific towns, and they do directly fall within that catchment.
Great. And Valerie, we have another one for you. Do you or any other groups manage invasive Phragmites near the locks on the Rideau Canal?
So we don't yet have a formal Phragmites plan. Like I said, we're kind of at the point where we're picking up kind of management priorities across both systems, and Water Soldier and Water Chestnut were existing programs that, you know, were limited to the Trent-Severn and the Rideau being primary invasion areas. So we don't yet have a formal frag plan, although it is certainly on the radar for species at risk action planning and kind of values mapping across the system.
All right, thank you for that. And our last question goes to Brenda. Why are there no aquatic invasive plants regulated under the PPA?
That's a good question. It could be that the PESCA risk assessments have found that the ones that they've looked at so far hasn't had an environmental effect, but there's so much out there that probably hasn't been assessed yet that they would have to do more work. So I'm sure there's some out there that would be on that list.
Of course. All right, well, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you very much to our presenters for providing us with such great information today, and for all of our audience members as well. That's it's for you guys that we have these forums. Thank you very much, everyone. And our next presentation is community action, and it's starting in a few minutes, so we should give them the go-to webinar. Thank you, everyone. Bye.